Alright Reds, this is Eddie Gibbs from Anfield Index, and this is a paid advertisement from BetterHelp Therapy Online. What's something you'd always wanted to learn? Remember back when you were a kid, always curious, always discovering something new. Now think about this, as an adult, do you still spark that joy of learning new things? Whether it's gardening, picking up a new language, or maybe mastering bowling to outshine your best friend, it's essential to keep that spirit alive. And guess what? Therapy can be a fantastic way to reconnect with your inner student, your sense of wonder. Because truly, the back-to-school vibe isn't just for kids or young adults, it's for everyone at any stage of life. Now, I haven't used BetterHelp myself, but I've seen firsthand how therapy can dramatically shift perspectives. It's not just about heavy issues, it's about enhancing your everyday life, learning to cope better with daily stress, setting healthy boundaries, and empowering yourself to be the best version of yourself. It's a space where anyone can benefit from a little extra insight and support. So why BetterHelp? Well, it's therapy that fully adapts to your timetable, and it's all online. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, and they'll match you with a therapist. And if you feel the need to change therapists, you can switch anytime without an extra charge. How's that for flexibility? With over 5,000 therapists in the UK, BetterHelp offers a wide variety of specialists, ready to help you rediscover your curiosity and tackle new challenges. Visit betterhelp.com/index today. There's a bonus. Get 10% off your first month. Remember, that's betterhelp.com/index. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp and keep on learning, no matter where you are on life's journey.
This episode is brought to you by Microsoft Azure. Turn your ideas into reality with an Azure free account. Get everything you need to develop apps across cloud and hybrid environments, scale workloads, create cloud-connected mobile experiences, and so much more. Discover what you can create with popular services free for 12 months. Learn more at azure.com. That's AZURE.com. And sign up for a free account to start building in the cloud today.
Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our Quick Publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Rival Recon here on Anfield Index Pro. I'm Harry Sethi. The international break is now firmly in the rearview mirror, with a number of Reds enjoying very successful spells with their countries during the break. Not least a rejuvenated-looking Trent Alexander-Arnold, who returned to the England team and secured back-to-back Man of the Match awards. But with international football done for now, we return to the business at hand as Arne Slot's side look to maintain an impressive start to the Premier League season, as they take on Nottingham Forest at Anfield this Saturday afternoon. Joining me on the pod this week to share his insight into how Forest navigated a perilous situation last season and the club's hopes and ambitions for this campaign, I'm delighted to welcome on managing editor of Nottingham Forest News and co-host of the Red Side of the Trent podcast, Lee Clarke. Welcome on, Lee. Good to speak with you.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good. Plenty to discuss, I think, when it comes to Forest, and I do want to jump straight into this season and talk about the future and the fixtures ahead. Obviously, not to mention this weekend's fixture, but I did want to ask you just first off, because we are early in the season, cast your mind back to the final whistle, the final game of last season. Obviously, a very eventful, very meaningful game in terms of that result securing safety for Forest in terms of their position in the Premier League last season. But I want to ask you, I guess, overriding thoughts when that final whistle did go, and I guess just so to ask you to summarize what your thoughts were about the campaign as a whole.
Yeah, I think the overriding thought was very much relief. I think
right.
I'm not being unkind on the three that got relegated, but making no bones about it, I think we stayed up because the other three were so bad. Burnley and Sheffield United in particular, I think that'd be a little bit harsh on Luton. I think there was both sets of fans kind of adopted this little rivalry. Luton were adamant for a long period of time that because they were so spirited, apparently, on home soil, they would overcome us because towards the end of the season, we couldn't look like we were going to string, a couple of points together, let alone a win. So for a little while, it was on kind of a bit of a knife edge. So, yeah, it was definitely relief when the whistle went at Burnley. I think ultimately, if Luton fans must be kicking themselves because they're now languishing at the bottom of the Championship, and had they won, probably if they claimed probably 3 or 4 more points at a key stage of in that middle of the last 6 games sort of period, I think they'd have probably stayed up ahead of us because I'm not sure we'd have had the mentality last season to get ourselves out of it had we dropped into the bottom 3. So yeah, definitely relief. And I think the season as a whole is one that just won't live long in the memory. Obviously, we lost probably the best manager the football club's had since Brian Clough. And although I was very much in the camp of the time was right, if not necessarily because I was hell-bent on slating him and wanting him to leave, he was like a broken man by the time Steve Cooper left. And it was just sad to see the decline in a man who was so often so vibrant in his press conferences and such. He just turned into a broken man. It was absolutely killing him that he couldn't get the team playing, should I say. So yeah, it was a pretty drab campaign on the whole, and one that will happily consign to the history books, I suppose.
And you mentioned obviously the manager leaving the club, and it being understandably emotional for given what he'd meant and what he'd achieved with the club. In terms of his replacement in Nuno Espirito Santo, what were your thoughts when that appointment was made in terms of, I guess, the profile of manager that the club went out and sought after, and especially contrasting him with, I suppose, sort of what everything the former manager had achieved?
Yeah, I think my thoughts when he was appointed, I guess I was a little underwhelmed. I think some of the names that we'd been linked with, we were linked with Glasner, who ended up at Palace and obviously took them on that ridiculous run. We were linked with a couple of others as well who were probably bigger names and would have been better in the long term, I guess, than what Nuno would. But I think once I got my head around it and it became a reality, I kind of looked at Nuno, and at that period of time, I kind of thought that he was perhaps exactly what we needed, just a fresh idea, a fresh personality almost. Maybe we'd become a little bit too soft. I think perhaps Cooper, I never struck Cooper as the sort that after a bad result, he'd tear absolute shreds off them. And that might be a complete myth, but I just, from the outside looking in, there was never that much of a reaction after a particularly bad result last season. So yeah, I thought that Nuno might come in and maybe ruffle a few feathers in the dressing room for starters. But yeah, I guess I was a little underwhelmed, but I think, yeah, it's a strange one because I think only this season are we kind of starting to see fans really get on board with what he's trying to do, the kind of player he wants to bring in. So yeah, I think it was a funny one because obviously when he first came in, we had the game against Bournemouth at home where we were absolutely robbed of sending off in like the 12th minute, I think it was, so we ended up losing 3-2. But then we went and beat Man United and Newcastle back to back. So it was kind of like all those that really didn't want him and were really against it were instantly on board. But then, as we found so often in the Premier League, we went on another it wasn't a particularly bad run, but it was a pretty average run where we had some home games where we didn't really get the results that we probably should have, been looking to get after beating Newcastle and Man U. So yeah, it was. It's still a strange one with Nuno because he's never going to be the fist-pumping purist that Steve Cooper was. He's far more laid back. He's a bit more reserved on the touchline. So yeah, I don't think the jury's still out because I think a lot of certainly the game-going fans are definitely on board with what he's trying to do.
Yeah, for me, it was an interesting appointment just based upon sort of where his stature was at that time as well, and the fact that I think him returning to the Premier League was as much about him proving a point as well. I think in terms of sort of him still being able to sort of deliver high quality coaching in a league like the Premier League, having left it, and especially how things ended after such a brief sort of tenure at Spurs as well. So certainly interested to see what he can do this season, and somewhat familiar with what he was trying to do at Wolves and his style of play, and some of the criticisms that came around that, and some of the, I think I'd often speak to Wolves fans and they'd say, we love this, this, and this about the team, but we just wish that we could get into an extra gear. And I'll be interested to speak to you about some of the early signs of some of the players that he's looked to bring into the club as well. But I wanted to also ask you if there were sort of glimmers last season in terms of players that you felt actually were largely responsible for ultimately securing that promotion. I mean, I think they're probably going to speak about one of them this podcast who finally secured an England call-up in Morgan Gibbs-White. But I just wanted to get your perspective on players that you thought did play key roles last season, and perhaps whether those same players are going to be as integral this time round.
Yeah, I mean, it was very much our attacking quality last year that was the bright sparks. I think Gibbs-White through the middle with Wood just ahead of him, who had a fantastic season. I mean, and no one would have. I mean, I've defended Wood since the moment we signed him, but even I didn't think he was capable of 14 Premier League goals at 32. So yeah, he was a massive surprise package. And then obviously on the flanks, we've got Anthony Elanga and Callum Hudson-Odoi. I think Elanga got 15 goal contributions, and Hudson-Odoi maybe slightly less, but I think he did score 8. So yeah, those 4 were absolutely integral to everything that Nuno kind of tried to do when he came in. It is weird because I don't think Nuno's style of play really took the shackles off from Cooper to a certain degree. The shape and the system was very similar, but he just kind of gave the attacking players more luxury to kind of do their stuff when we were in possession of the ball, rather than kind of camping 11 men behind the ball and then hoping that Elanga's pace would cause problems on the counter. So yeah, those 4 players were absolutely integral. And obviously Murillo at the back as well, Murillo centre half. But everyone else was kind of, the midfield area was kind of, we had 4 midfielders who you could rotate them at any given time and you'd probably get similar sort of results. But yeah, Murillo at the back and the 4 going forward were definitely the integral ones for us last year.
It's interesting, actually, because I remembering sort of past conversations I had with Wolves fans when Nuno was boss there, and I think one thing that used to come through was just actually a desire from that team that they wanted to be more expansive. They wanted to be less of a well-drilled defensive unit, and then like a quick counter-attack, thinking of the likes of Adama Traore and others, Neto and Jota in the past as well. And I wanted to be more expansive. And I think actually, in the end, that seemed to come down to just limitations around certain players had in defence and what they could and couldn't do, really. So it's interesting to hear what you say there around him actually looking to actually give the players a bit more freedom. But I also see what you said actually around not taking the shackles off necessarily, because you mentioned that run after Newcastle and after United last season, and as you say, I mean, it's not like there's any particularly heavy defeats in that run. It's narrow defeats here and there. The score lines aren't ones that give you sort of huge cause for concern. It's just narrowly being edged out in certain contests. Certainly think about the Liverpool game last season as well. For many reasons, understand just how tight a contest that was. Again, doesn't really come across when you're looking at the result on paper. And I want to ask you, end of the season, relief is the primary feeling. You've got this new manager who's still getting his feet under the table. And when you were looking at the squad and thinking, what areas were you looking at the squad and thinking, okay, these are where we're going to need to reinforce it if there's going to be a stronger campaign next time round? And I suppose also thinking as well about the sort of players, the profile of players that you think Nuno Espirito Santo was after. Where were the areas that you thought the club should strengthen? And then perhaps just go into your thoughts on the business the club actually ended up doing.
Yeah, so I think strength in depth was the order of the day for me. I think last year when we had injuries, the options from the bench weren't always what we were craving. I think our use of the loan market last year was absolutely abysmal, for want of a more laid-back approach. It just, that's the only term I can use to describe it. It was awful. Pretty much every loan player that we had little to zero impact.
Who were a few examples? Was there?
So we had, in the summer transfer window, we took Andre Santos on loan from Chelsea, who's now ripping it up with Strasbourg in France. Steve Cooper didn't actually know we'd signed him until he turned up for a training session one day. So that's where the recruitment thinking wasn't kind of joined up back then, which has changed, which I'll come on to. So yeah, he signed. I think interestingly, he only actually played 7 minutes in the Premier League, and that came at Anfield. He came on for the last 7 minutes at Anfield when we lost 3-0. That was the only Premier League football he played for us. So he went back in January. We had Divock Origi, obviously signed from AC Milan. Being honest, from the outset, I thought that would be a pretty decent signing. I thought he'd provide decent foil for a 1 year would, but it never transpired like that. I think Origi's best football in his career has come when he's played in better teams where he's got better service. I do appreciate that, obviously, to a Liverpool fan, it'll be odd to hear any Origi slander for what he did for your football club, but it just didn't work for him. It wasn't the right club. It wasn't the right time in his career for him to be coming back to the Premier League, I didn't think. And then we signed Giovanni Reina on loan from Dortmund. Obviously, he's a wonder kid. Also, they say, I guess he is kind of just outside that age bracket these days. But yeah, he just never played. He plays as a number 10, and obviously that's where Gibbs White plays. I mean, when he did play, he looked okay in parts, but he never really kind of got anyone out of the seats. And then we signed a young Portuguese kid called Rodrigo Ribeiro. I think he played 15 minutes in the Premier League, another loan signing. So yeah, the loan market was, I just think when you're a Premier League club, you've got to, especially in our position on the food chain, you've got to utilise that loan market a little bit better. And I think just fast forwarding a little bit to this season, you look at the loan signings we've made this season. We've signed James Ward-Prowse, who's obviously played 11 times for England and is probably without doubt the best set-piece taker in the Premier League. And we've signed Alex Moreno, who's a 31-year-old left-back from Aston Villa with bags of experience, who absolutely tore it up at Villa for the first 6 months before he got a bad injury. So I think they're more the sort of loan signings we should be looking to make. And I think there's a clear evidence there, I think, that the club realised that they kind of slipped up last year with the use of the loan market.
And in terms of what you were alluding to a little bit earlier around the, I suppose, like the greater coherence about the transfer strategy this time round than perhaps what you saw last time, and the loan signings is just a good example of that. What have the changes been, I suppose, off the pitch that have resulted in that?
Yeah, so we've appointed a chief. Our overseas scout used to work at Benfica. Obviously, on deadline day, we signed centre-half Murato. He came from Benfica, so clearly there's some joined-up thinking there. And we probably 12 months ago, we got rid of George Sirianos, who signed some really good players when we first got promoted. We got him back initially on a freelance basis because I think Marinakis kind of realised that he'd shot himself in the foot a little bit by letting him go. So we got him back on a freelance basis, and then in the summer we actually made the decision to get him back full time. So yeah, it's no surprise to me that our signings this summer were all probably between the age bracket of sort of 20 to 26. There was a couple of exceptions to that criteria, but yeah, in large, it was a case of lowering the average age, signing players, a bit like we tried to do when we first got promoted, really, signing players for relatively low transfer fees that we anticipate they call it the Brighton model in this day and age, don't they? Because Brighton do it so well, where they sign players for next to nothing that hardly anyone's heard of, and then in 2 or 3 years' time, they're going for absolute millions. With it being Forest, I'm not saying it's going to be, obviously it's a new thing for us, so I'm not saying it's going to be quite as successful as Brighton's model, but I think that's the clear shift in strategy. I think Sirianos has got this data-driven approach. There's talk that when we were looking for a striker, there was 3 strikers on the list, and it was a case of none of them were in any particular order. It was just what the data that we popped into the system had thrown out and said these 3 strikers are perfect for your system. So yeah, it does look like it was a much more settled summer, and one that was badly needed because we were desperate to kind of have a transfer window where our own fans could maybe look at it and think, yeah, actually we're starting to act like a Premier League club that wants to be established, should do.
And do you think that the club has addressed the sort of the priority positions in terms of sort of the players that have come in?
Yeah, I think we have. I think being brutally honest and extremely greedy, I would have loved another striker. I think if we get an injury to either Wood or a Wanye, we'll probably be a little bit short in attack. But what I would say is we've signed Jota Silva, who can play. He's pretty unheard of at the minute. Scored a very good goal against Newcastle in the Carabao Cup. But from what I understand, he's come from Vitória in Portugal, and on some occasions for them, he did play as a striker. So I think there is options. There's Ramon Sosa as well, who we've signed, the Paraguayan international. He's a bit similar, one of those that you can kind of slot in any of those four positions at the top end of the pitch. So yeah, I think that was the only blemish. I would give our transfer window probably a 9 out of 10, just because I can't really give it a 10 out of 10 because we didn't get that stellar striker that we kind of shaved a little bit. But yeah, it is every other position was absolutely spot on, really.
And the biggest outlay was it was Elliot Anderson, wasn't it? Around about 40 million euros or something like that. But again, fits that model, as you mentioned, 21 years of age, with the hope that there's going to be sort of progression there and maybe a profitable sell on in the future. Is that do you think that area of central midfield was particularly important, or do you think that is one that again the club is looking to the future?
Yeah, do you know, I don't think it was. I think, as I said previously, I think last season we had 4 centre mids and you could have rotated them. But the thing that I would say is the reason for that is Sangare this season is proving like a new signing. He had a bit of a bum deal last year. Obviously, he signed 3 games into the season, I think it was, on deadline day. He struggled to get up with the pace a little bit. And then he went to the AFCON. I believe he got malaria while he was at AFCON. He lost loads of weight. Didn't come back quite as physically, evident that his game needs physicality. So obviously losing that weight was really detrimental to his performances. That subsequently saw him benched, and he couldn't get back in because the other players in midfield were playing so well. So yeah, this season he's had a full pre-season. He's even turned his back a little bit in pre-season on Ivory Coast and said, "Look, I'm going to get fit. I want to get back in the Forest team," and he's come back better for it. But I think what I would just say with the Elliot Anderson stuff is I think he does very much fit the profile of what we're looking for. But I think it was more that we tried to take advantage of the situation at Newcastle. I think we'd liked Elliot Anderson for a long time, but we always knew that he'd probably be out of our price range. Obviously, when it became apparent that Newcastle were teetering on the edge of a points deduction, they kind of had to come up with some sort of deal. So it looks expensive from the outset, but obviously we signed him for 35 million. Our third choice goalkeeper, Vlachodimos, went to Newcastle for 20 million. So it kind of offsets the balance a little bit. Financial gymnastics, I think they call it in this bonkers world of PSR, that we all have to adhere to. So yeah, it looks a very good signing. He's just won the Player of the Month, and yeah, he looks really good.
Connection is a healthy and essential aspect of our daily lives. From a warm hug after a hard day to kind words just when we need them, these gentle moments give us an understanding of life's true meaning. But when the ability to connect is interrupted by the hustle of daily life and to-do lists pile up next to the worry of who needs school supplies, sometimes making decisions about our health and the well-being of our loved ones can take a back seat. When it comes to those we care for, vaccines are one of the greatest public health success stories, and along with other measures, are one way to help prevent certain diseases. At Merck, we envision communities where families, healthcare providers, local organizations, and advocates work together. Health equity happens when every person, regardless of age and ethnicity, in every community, has fair access to healthcare, including the vaccines they need. For more information, please visit whyvaccines.com.
I don't need a VPN. I've got nothing to hide. Ha. This is what I used to tell myself before I hooked up with LibertyShield.com. Not only is my home internet now fully encrypted, but I can now access all the websites I want, whenever I want, and do so from absolutely anywhere. As a Liverpool fan, I love to know I can now watch every match, regardless of whether it's on UK TV or not. My Liberty Shield VPN makes sure nothing is blocked and guarantees me super fast streaming speed throughout that match. You can get connected right now with their software package, which includes a 48-hour no-obligation free trial and instant access to their apps for Apple, Android, Fire TV, PC, Mac, an Android TV. Or go a step further like I have and get one of their pre-configured VPN routers. These small but powerful devices allow you to easily connect every device in your home to VPN, making it the perfect solution for smart TVs, Mac boxes, and games consoles. Visit libertyshield.com today and use coupon code AIVPN25 to get 25% off at checkout.
And in terms of sort of, you mentioned maybe fans on board with Espirito Santo, and maybe it's becoming a little bit clearer now as he's got more players into the club that perhaps he would want to sort of fit the style of play he's looking to implement. This season, again, we're very early, but have you noticed any tweaks into sort of the way in which he was looking to approach games last season as opposed to what you've seen this time round? Are there any noticeable differences so far in what he's trying to get the players to do?
Yeah, I think he very much wants to address their own form. I think he knows that we didn't win enough home games under him last year, and a large reason for that was that we weren't on the front foot enough at home. We often let teams come to our place and dictate the tempo far too much. It's funny because we've played Wolves and Bournemouth so far at home this season and only ended up with 2 points. We've drawn them both, so particularly against Bournemouth, it was a strange one. I think we had the most shots in the Premier League that weekend, but we just couldn't find that second goal. And then, as so often is the case in the Premier League, when you don't find that second goal, you get sucker punched at the end. Similarly with the Wolves game, we went and scored after 10 minutes, I think it was, and then literally within 90 seconds, their players just spun from 30 yards, and he's hit the sort of effort that if he does it 100 more times, the other 99 go into the stand, and it's flown into the top corner. And I think I genuinely think that if that had not happened, I think we'd have won a very drab game of Premier League football 1-0. It was just one of those games. But yeah, we are having more shots. I think in both games, it's difficult to kind of give him a glowing reference just yet because of the opposition we've faced. But it has been positive to see us kind of go on the front foot in both home games, albeit against teams that you would say that are going to be around us in the table this season.
Yeah, actually, you mentioned the shots there. I was looking at an article around Forest just ahead of the podcast, and I think actually going into that international break, it is Forest who lead the league in the number of shots so far. Actually, I think it's 53, Liverpool 48. There's a couple of 3 teams that join on 48 below you. So it just goes to sort of emphasize what you're mentioning here into sort of actually the most shots and the most shots on target as well. So that attacking intent that you mentioned there from Espirito Santo has been pretty clear to see.
Yeah, that is just a bonkers stat. It's easy to see why we wanted a striker. And that's nothing against Wood because obviously he scored 2 in the 3 games that we've played.
Yeah.
But just having a different sort of striker would probably have enhanced the style of football that Nuno wants to play. To be fair, it's this, when you've kind of had that many shots and you've only scored 3 goals in 3 games, it's kind of one of those worrying things that you kind of think we're going to have to be really good defensively against. We're probably still not going to score that many goals. But let's see. I mean, that could change. There could be, if we keep, I always think it's more of a worry if you're not creating any chances. And that's kind of what we were doing the first season in the Premier League as a brand new side that was nowhere near ready for the Premier League, really. At least now we are creating the chances. So hopefully, I think it's a bit of a cliche, but you tend to find that if you're creating that many chances, one of these days someone's going to get a bit of a good hiding. Obviously, you face teams in this league where that's just not possible, but Saturday being one of them. But you would like to think that if we keep knocking on teams' doors, then eventually we are going to have a game where we do score, 2 or 3 on a pretty consistent basis.
You mentioned, that stat being a bit bonkers as well. I saw another one as well around sort of like, I think Chris Wood having the most non-penalty Premier League goals since the start of the 23-24 season as well, which I think, you mentioned, you've long defended him, but again, that surprised you just how prolific he's managed to be so far in his Forest career. But you mentioned that having a different mold of striker. Obviously, Liverpool fans familiar with Awayini, even though he didn't actually get a chance to actually play for Liverpool, and Chris Wood and the kinds of strikers they are. when you mention that different profile, would you be referring to somebody who's I don't know, more of a pacey merchant, or actually are you thinking about someone who's more of a prolific kind of finisher in there? I mean, what kind of profile of striker, if you had managed to get them in, do you think would have been the best suited?
Yeah, certainly someone who could get in behind, someone who's going to thrive on sort of Gibbs White slipping through balls in, who can kind of afford to give a centre-back a couple of yards of pace and still beat into the ball sort of striker. We were linked with two. We were linked with three, actually, but Santiago Jimenez was one of them from Feyenoord. I think he probably would, out of the three, maybe have been maybe a little bit of... I think he'd have been the biggest stellar signing out of the three that we were linked with, but I think he might have been a little bit... I don't think he would have fit that criteria I've just said to a certain degree. I think he would have done it sometimes, but I think he was more of a hold it up and lay it off sort of striker. The two others were Omar Mamouche from Eintracht Frankfurt. He was absolutely rapid. Watched quite a bit of the Bundesliga and he torments defenders with his pace. And the other one was Eddie Nketiah from Arsenal. And he got a lot of criticism from some of our fans on social media when we were linked with him, purely because of his goal-scoring record at Arsenal, which it doesn't look great, but I think when you actually tally up how many chances Nketiah's actually had in the first team, it looks like he's played a lot of football, but how many times has he actually had a prolonged period as the number one striker? I'd say not very often at Arsenal. So I think someone like him at 25 would probably have been... He'd have just fit with that whole recruitment model that we tried to do in the summer. So yeah, it's a little bit of a shame we couldn't get that one over the line.
Yeah, it felt like it was close at a certain stage, and I think he is a player who I think you're waiting to see exactly sort of what he can offer, because as you mentioned, right, he's been feeding off scraps really, because of the number of appearances that he's managed to get, I suppose. And Jimenez, I'm sure the listeners who will be somewhat aware of him, and as Arne Slot's come in to manage Liverpool now, so the success he had with him and is actually turning him into more of a prolific goal scorer when he wasn't necessarily that when he joined Feyenoord. I think there's been some similar hopes put about around sort of, can he work similar magic on Darwin Núñez in terms of sort of actually improving his sort of ruthlessness in front of goal. So we'll have to see. Time will tell. But again, Jimenez, I think, sort of, as you mentioned, a different kind of striker to perhaps that complete pace, because I suppose he was playing with the likes of Minter, who's now at Brighton, I believe, unless I'm imagining things. And in terms of expectations for the season, then, I mean, it's really early. It's hard to sort of necessarily make. I'm not asking you to make a prediction, but where do you think fans' heads are at in terms of, you know, the window that the club has had? Maybe sort of everybody pushing in the same direction this time round. A new manager. What do you think the expectations are this time round?
It's interesting. We're a very amusing fan base in the Premier League, I find, and I speak as one of them. I maintain that I'm the sort of fan these days that I'm probably a bit boring in the sense that I don't get too high with the highs and I don't get too low with the lows. I'm always in the middle of the spectrum. But it's funny because whenever we seem to win a game and have a really good win, we start looking at flights for random European countries for the Conference League. Whenever we lose a game, we're going to finish rock bottom of the league, and there's kind of no in between. So yeah, I think where is the fan perception that we'll finish this season? I think we'd all like to see a little bit of progression. I think with Nuno having a full pre-season, we've kind of gone back to almost 12 months ago, really, where Cooper had a full pre-season with a Premier League group of players, rather than when he first came up and it was half Championship and just players that weren't good enough sort of thing. So yeah, I think we'd like to see some progression. Progression on 17th, I suppose, is 16th. I personally would like to see. I think we've got a group of players good enough now to finish a little bit higher than that. I think if we could finish 13th or 14th this season, this might sound really negative to a club like Liverpool who have got ambitions much higher up the table, but I think that would actually be deemed as a really successful season, and it would give us a good platform to kind of build even further with, again, a good core of players. Again, we can kind of cherry pick the areas where we think we've kind of underperformed this season again, get stronger players in, and then maybe go again in the fourth season and maybe try and target perhaps the top half. But I think at this stage, it's still a little bit premature to be talking about the top half, I think.
Yeah, I can certainly echo sort of the desire to sort of like Google random places across Europe to sort of travel to in terms of sort of the fixtures that may be thrown your way should the club obviously qualify for the likes of the Conference League and beyond. And I wanted to ask, I mean, in terms of the game on Saturday, you spoke about the fixtures the club's had so far, Bournemouth, Southampton, Wolves. How do you imagine Nuno will differ in terms of how he sets his side up against Liverpool for an away game like this? Knowing the threats that Liverpool pose as well, we've not yet seen that right from him this season. But I suppose there were clues in terms of how he set up the side last time round.
Yeah, it's a hot topic of discussion in this one, because obviously in the 3 games we've played so far, we played Southampton away alongside Bournemouth and Wolves. So we've gone into it with the intention of being on the front foot, whereas obviously this one's going to be a lot different to that. So yeah, I think I wouldn't be surprised to see him revert to 3 at the back. He tried that against Newcastle in the Cup, and for large parts of obviously we conceded after 18 seconds in that game, but for the rest of the game it was kind of dominated by us, but for the last maybe 10 minutes when Newcastle weren't pressing for the winner. But yeah, I think it would seem strange for him to try that formation out against Newcastle in the Cup if he had no intention of using it this season. And if he doesn't try that formation against Liverpool away, I'm not entirely sure where else he will try it. So, yeah, I think we'll go 3 at the back, 3 centre-halves with a couple of wing-backs, and it'll probably mean someone like Gibbs-White playing out of position, potentially at the top end of the pitch, with one of the 2 strikers. Wood's been playing for New Zealand in America, so there's some discussions from the press conference today whether he will be able to make it, but he has been in training this morning, so it'll either be Wood or one. But yeah, I do anticipate we'll probably revert to 3 at the back.
And what I think it's been this pod in particular. We always get a chance to speak to opposition fans, journalists who cover clubs across the league, and try and get their perspectives on Liverpool from the outside in, right? Because I think whenever you're following your own club, you can microanalyze to such a degree. You often get lost in it, and there's plenty of Liverpool podcasts and discussion to do just that. But I just wanted to get your view. I mean, it is the start of a new era for Liverpool, with obviously Jurgen Klopp having made the decision to leave at the end of the last season, and Arne Slot's had a good start clearly in terms of sort of the results and the performances so far. And I think that United one will go a long way to reassure some fans who maybe were a little bit less certain about the appointment. But I just wanted your perspective. I mean, what are you expecting from Liverpool this season? I mean, having lost someone like Klopp, and knowing the players that they do have at their disposal, I mean, would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult because I don't think... Well, I've seen 2 of Liverpool's 3 games. I saw the first one before we played against Ipswich. Obviously, the opposition is a difficult barometer. And I saw the Man United game last time out. The thing that struck me was there's a lot more touches of the ball from the Klopp system, I thought. A lot more kind of progressive build-up play rather than the heavy metal kind of get it forward and let the front 3 or 4 wreak havoc.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the main thing I noticed. But I don't. Having seen those, seeing the start to the season you've made and the defensive solidity, I don't anticipate there's going to be a great deal of difference to when Klopp was the manager. Really, I still anticipate. I was sceptical at the start of the season, I'll be brutally honest with you, whether Liverpool would have a real drop off, just because of everything that Klopp had done. I wasn't sure whether Slot would have enough time to kind of implement his style of play. I mean, clearly he has. Clearly he's a fantastic coach looking at the first 3 games. So I've got no real concerns that Liverpool are going to have any sort of significant tail-off, significant transition, I suppose you could say. So, yeah, I anticipate they'll be top 4. Whether they can challenge for the title, I suppose if they keep up this form where they're winning games, scoring goals and not conceding them, yeah, they're going to be right in the mix. So, yeah, it's Anfield. Liverpool never lose at Anfield. So it's always going to be a tough game. It's over the years. I mean, Klopp's instilled this, I suppose. But, yeah, Anfield has become that sort of ground where, for a club like ours, you kind of just have to say, look, if we can get out of this game with a couple of goals deficit and a defeat, let's move on to the next one, because our season won't be defined on the result we get on Saturday.
It's going to be interesting, I think. I think that, as you mentioned, Klopp did do a lot of work to, I guess, reinstill that sort of fortress home record. Such a smattering of losses at home over the years. I think I can't remember what the exact stats are, but I'm pretty sure there's a number of players in that squad who have pretty ridiculous records at Anfield. Virgil being one of them as well. So, but yeah, I guess that's Slot's task this season, is to obviously maintain that. I think I share some of your perspectives. Actually, so far seems to be a pretty meticulous chap, and clearly a very involved coach, perhaps in sort of a slightly different way to what Jurgen was doing at the end, with Pep Landis doing a lot of work as well. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. But as you mentioned, that combination of scoring goals, not conceding them, and generally keeping hold of the ball. I'd take some more of that if it's on offer this season.
Yeah, I guess another acid test for Slot is going to come when Liverpool do go behind it. When they go behind in a game to a side that they hope to compete with, so like a City or an Arsenal or not Man United, then that's ludicrous. Someone that's going to be at that top end of the pitch. If they do take the lead against Liverpool, more so at Anfield, I guess, that's going to be the real test, is will the team show the same level of kind of commitment to the cause that they always showed under Klopp? But obviously you won't know that until you do actually concede a goal.
Exactly, yeah. I hope it's a long time until I actually have to deal with that, because I think that was the one thing last season that was clearly an issue, just the number of times Liverpool conceded and had to come back from a goal behind. It's very I suppose stressful on the players as well as certainly was for the fans. And just before we wrap up here, Lee, I just wanted to ask you, I mean, I did say earlier on I wasn't going to make you do a prediction, but I think it's this part of the season, you often fans' heads are still sort of dreaming of what may be. I mentioned earlier on around Núñez and sort of hopes for him discovering a completely ruthless touch in front of goal, because that would be a lot of fun if he could do that. Do you have any sort of gut feelings, I guess bad faith predictions that are sort of rattling around your head, that you just fancy a particular player or anything like that for Forest this season?
Sorry, you cut off a little bit there. What, just in terms of on Saturday, or just in the season in general?
Not on Saturday. I mean, just for the season in general. So, like, for example, it could be like mine is around Núñez and him discovering a completely ruthless touch in front of goal. And then I suppose at the end of the season there'll be an amnesty where I can admit I was wrong, or I can admit I was right. Are there any similar kind of predictions that you've got in your head? You just gut feelings about players?
Well, I mean, before a ball was kicked this season, I said that Sangare would be like a new signing. I said that he would really show everyone why we paid 30 million for him. Now, after 3 game weeks, he's sat top of the number of tackles for any Premier League player. He's also got some other, I think he's near the top of the list for just overall ground duels won as well. So he's already busy proving my pre-season theory correct. The other one that I maybe had... Yeah, there's a few. I think Elliot Anderson already looks like an amazing signing. So yeah, there's nothing really that I think the one player that I would like to mention actually is Milenkovic at the back. I think no one really anticipated that we need a centre off quite as badly as we did until we saw Milenkovic play, because he already looks absolutely brilliant. And the fact that we got him for 12 million is already looking like money well spent. So yeah, I'm anticipating a big season for him, and I actually wouldn't be surprised if Milenkovic finishes the season as our captain, to be honest.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting one. I think there's a sort of a new signing coming in and really stamping his authority to that level. So I think it's one for.
And I think the reason I say that is just to add some context to that, is since we got promoted, we've not really had. Obviously, we got promoted with Joe Worrell as the captain. He quickly kind of got displaced in the team. And then at the minute, you've kind of got Ryan Yates and Morgan Gibbs-White who kind of just throw it to each other because they're not typically on the pitch at the same time. So if Yates comes off the bench, which he has done in every game so far this season, the armband's just been thrown to him from Gibbs-White. And I always think the captain's armband probably should mean a little bit more than that. And I'd like to see think one thing that Nuno would perhaps like is, I think in this day and age you need a number of leaders in the dressing room, but it wouldn't surprise me if at some point he kind of thinks, right, enough's enough. You're the one kind of player that I know that's going to play every single week. So I'm gonna give you the armband on a more consistent basis, because I think as much as Gibbs White's going to play every week, I just question at 24 whether, as much as he's undoubtedly a leader in our squad and he's very much technically our best player, I just question whether him having the captaincy is maybe more harm than it is good, in a weird sort of way.
Yeah, it might free him up if he didn't have to worry
absolutely.
about that. Well, Leo, I want to thank you again just for coming on and for sharing all your insight into sort of Forest and sort of what transpired last season and sort of what you're expecting this time round, given the signings, given the coach in the dugout, and given how early on we are in the season. So really want to thank you for coming on, and just wanted to also offer you the opportunity just to any plugs around sort of work that you're doing ahead of the game or sort of podcasts for the rest of the season to let the listeners know about.
Yeah, so I'm one quarter of a podcast called Red Side of the Trent. If you don't already, do the usual bits and bobs, follow us on Twitter. We're on YouTube as well, Red Side of the Trent. Click us a like, subscribe, and we can get a few more interactions on there.
Absolutely, yeah. Would really encourage all the listeners to do so. I mean, I think one of the best things about this show each season has been sort of listeners who perhaps are very often in Liverpool bubbles becoming familiar with some actual sort of real insight into clubs across the league. So we definitely encourage listeners to check out the pod as well. And Lee, thank you once again for coming on.
No problem. Please go easy on us on Saturday, if I can ask one favour.
We'll see. I mean, I'm always weary about a post-international break game, but I'm excited to see a few who stayed home actually and did some extra work in Darwin and Chiesa. So I can't promise anything.
I think Liverpool have got. Have you got Milan in midweek next week as well?
Yes. Yeah. Oh God. Yes. It's about
that
to be
feels like a much bigger game.
Yeah, it's about to be that completely crazy fixture schedule as well. So I'm interested to see how we deal with that, especially with Elliot having broken his foot as well. So that's going to be interesting. But I imagine rotation will be the key word, I suppose. But again, Lee, just want to thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
A big thank you as always to listening in to Rival Recon this week. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. And as ever, we'll be back again with another episode ahead of the Reds' next league game, looking to bring you greater insight into the world of Liverpool's Premier League opponents. Until then, do listen in to all the other great content across Anfield Index, and if you're keen for more, subscribe to Anfield Index Pro for the meagre price of a cup of takeaway coffee. Until next time, up the Reds.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at anfieldindex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.